he needs no introduction, but I'll give it to him anyway. He's one of the best columnists of our generation and one of the best voices on ESPN, and a man who knows Stuart Scott as intimately as anyone else. He's Michael Wilbon. How are you, Michael?
Rich, I'm a little better than yesterday, and thank you for asking. And I want to start. I know you've probably gotten a lot of feedback. I thought you and Hannah Storm had the most difficult jobs in television and beyond yesterday because you had to deliver the news about your friend. And I admire and love both of you, and I could not have done it as anywhere near as well as either of you did it. And so I just wanted to say that before we start.
No, you're a good man, Michael. I appreciate you saying that. I don't know about you, but I mean, I find myself just even like right now, the last 40 minutes of doing the show and just talking football, my mind goes off it, and then I start thinking about it again, and it's tough to contain myself. I don't know if you're the same way. I just find myself every 40, 50 minutes just welling up in tears and wanting to go in the corner and start crying. I don't know if you're the same way, Michael.
Pretty much. I just sort of went through yesterday in a daze, and the first half of today, and just avoided everybody and everything except what I was doing. And in a couple of cases, I did Tony Kornheiser's show this morning, as we do every Monday morning here in Washington, and we talked about a little football, and I was distracted during that. And I also had my aunt passed away at the same time Stuart did yesterday morning.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I got a text message from Sage Steele at 6:23 a.m. Central Time. I was in our hometown of Chicago, our meeting, me and Stuart. And then I get off the plane, and I have like 52 text messages, and I'm like, oh, my God, this is awfully early on a Sunday morning for everybody to be up and texting even about Stuart, and half those were about my aunt who died of cancer as well. And so yesterday was one of the down days that I will ever have. It will be very memorable because of those two people passing at the same time. But with Stuart, my aunt was 98 years old. And so you know what? You knew it was going to be time. She knew it was going to be time. She'd joke about it. And over the last month, but when you're 49 years old and you got teenage daughters and so much more to live for, you're not joking about that.
Michael, I know the answer to the question, but I'm going to ask these questions to you anyway because I'd love just to hear your perspective and your thoughts. What do you think Stuart meant to the African-American sports fan or broadcaster who wanted to do his job? What do you think he meant, Michael?
Rich, that's a great question. And I've been trying to put that in some context today because I don't think I really knew. I don't think I had really assessed it. And I say that as an African-American journalism professional because I came at this from a very different perspective than Stuart, at least initially. I worked for a very buttoned-up, prestigious media organization in the Washington Post for all those years, 30 years, 20 of them before I even knew Stuart. And Stuart and I come from the same little plot of land in Chicago, the same little plot of land on the south side of Chicago, but very different ways we went about what we did. And it's interesting hearing Stuart was 10 years younger than me, and it's interesting hearing people talk about it. I mean, Stuart introduced an entirely new way of delivering sports content to people. And as you know, you referred to this yesterday, and you were much more aware of this than I was until very recently. People hated Stuart for that. People don't want their reading habits and their viewing habits altered, not 1 inch. Mm-hmm. And I was aware of that when I was a columnist. I was one of the first black columnists in the country. And you don't think of people who are in their 40s and 50s as being pioneers. Sadly, in this industry, they still can be. But in Stuart's case, he brought the language that he used was certainly, I'm going to use this intentionally, blacker, but it was also younger. It was deeper. It brought in more than just young black people. It brought in people who were tired of hearing it delivered the same old way. And he knew that. And he had to be fairly defiant about it to get it past not only his bosses, but also just the viewers and listeners who got angry and didn't want to hear it. And so I think it meant a whole lot more than I understood. I grew to understand it, I don't know, 5, 7, 8 years ago. I started to understand it a lot more. And I spent a lot of time with Stuart. And what happened is all of the language evolved because of it. Sports leads the way in a lot of things. A lot of things. I mean, we don't, sports doesn't get the credit for leading the culture in as many places as it ought to. 8 years before the Birmingham, the Selma bus boycott, Jackie Robinson integrated baseball. And so that's not to sort of try to put Rosa Parks to diminish what she did, but the fact is sports often leads the way. And in the case of language and style, sports almost always leads the way, and Stuart was the person who, through sports, did that. And so I think it's not just African Americans, though notably it is, but there are a lot of people out there that liked what he was bringing, even as a certain segment of the population railed against it.
Yeah, even a certain community organizer in Chicago in the early 90s, who's now the president of the United States, sending out a press release hailing Stuart's contributions. LeBron's tweeting about it. Tiger's tweeting about it. Kobe. I mean, just seeing all of the tributes, and I just wish in a way that Stuart would be able to see this, because it would have just meant so much to him, Michael, especially since you're just talking about the struggle about it.
You're so right about that. And, Scott Van Pelt mentioned that. I wrote a line in a column that I hope is on ESPN.com now. It should be posted. I wrote a line saying, Stuart was no shrinking violet. We love him.
Yeah.
He was no shrinking violet. He liked his role in the transition that we're discussing now. And yes, I say with a smile, one of the few I've mustered in the last 24 hours, that I wish he could just sort of get, about a 5-minute whiff of this, of the people who the people who represent the conversation going 180 degrees. And I'm certain he would enjoy it, because you know this, Rich, because you sat with him side by side, shoulder to shoulder, more days than I did. That stuff bothered him. He didn't let on publicly much. We might talk about it some. Like I would read Twitter and get angry, and I'm convinced even now I'm going to get fired because I'm going to say something to somebody through Twitter that's going to get me canned. Stuart would just, he let it go.
He did.
He let it go. It would make him angry.
Well, it fed him. It fed him, though, Michael.
So upbeat.
It fed him a little bit, though. It definitely fed him. I mean, I was definitely there sometimes when he would hear some of the, this is pre-Twitter, obviously, he would hear some of the haterade, that don't hate the player, hate the game, all that's things that he would be saying. I saw it, and he never really let it. It just served to fuel his fire a little bit. Before I let you go, though, Michael, my wife Susie, who you know, she texted me before the show. Happy memories. So I want to hit that before I let you go. Your favorite memory of Stuart? I know this is a macro question, so I'll tap dance a little bit longer to give you an idea to try and cull through the Rolodex of just, whether it's being at a game with him, or covering an event with him, being at a charity event with him, a happy memory of Stuart Scott for us to leave the conversation.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I'm going to post some photos, actually, from my own charity event in Washington, which was first with Tony Kornheiser and now currently with James Brown. And Stuart has supported him multiple times, taking a day off, doing whatever he's done to come to Washington to play golf and help raise money for DC CAP, which is just raising scholarship money, college money for kids. My favorite memory is the Sunday before my son was born. Stuart saying to me in the green room in Bristol on an NBA Sunday, he said, "Listen, I got to talk to you about becoming a dad, and you have to listen to me now."
Uh-huh.
And he was really quite serious. And he said, there are going to be all these things that as a first-time dad, and I was 49 years old, he said, there are all these things that you're going to hate the thought of doing, like changing smelly diapers and getting peed on and all this stuff, and you have to enjoy it. You have to embrace it. You should love all the things that you think you don't want to do. When your kid spills stuff on you and spits up on you and you got a new suit and a tie on and you're on the way out of the door to do the show, you have to love all of those things, and don't shy away from them. And in the moment, I'm thinking, what the hell is he talking about? He didn't describe anything that I want to do.
Right.
But I listened, and the second diaper I changed, my kid peed on me, Matthew, who's now almost 7 years old.
Yeah.
And I laughed hysterically, and I called Stuart. And the most important advice, is not the best, the most important advice I ever got about new fatherhood was from Stuart Scott. And I now deliver that speech to every expectant father I know. And I tell them I'm stealing this from Stuart. And it just sort of changed the tenor of how I went about the first 2 years of fatherhood. Because God knows I didn't know what I was doing. And Stuart had, because he'd been through it twice. And so I think of that. And there's a lot of, there's so many dinners and hanging out and stories, half of which we couldn't tell on family radio. But I think about that as my kid approaches 7 years old. And I showed him a picture this morning of Stuart and I holding him up at one of the golf tournaments, tossing him up in the air when he was about 8 months old, because he said to me, Dad, have I ever met Mr. Scott? And this was yesterday when he probably for the first time in his life saw tears running down his father's face. And I said, yeah, you did meet Mr. Scott. And I'm going to show him the pictures when he comes home from school today because we dug him up.
I love you, Michael Wilbon. Tell that to Kornheiser and everyone else there at the PTI crew, too. Thanks for calling in.
Same to you, Rich. Hugs to Susie, and thanks for having me.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
You bet.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.